Please write down the heading. Audit of non-government organizations, NGO. Just 2-3 points, then I'll stop. Audit of NGO, non-government organizations. Non-government organizations, NGO, or non-profit organizations. Now, if I tell you that how or what are the types of NGOs which we can have in India you can have a company which is formed as an NGO. Company can also run its business as an NGO. That means this company would be more into charity business. So you can form an NGO in the nature of a company. In the nature of a company, please understand what I am saying. You can also form an NGO in the nature of a trust. And of course, you can form an NGO in the nature of a society. In the nature of a society. If you want to form a company in the nature of an NGO, that means it is a company which is registered under the 1956, now 2013 Act. A trust, NGO in the trust nature can be registered under the Trust Act 1881, very old Act, 1881 Trust Act. Society can be registered under the Societies Registration Act 1882. These all numbers are given in the textbook, you can refer it from there. My objective to tell you is that these are the three possibilities by which you can have an NGO. Either in the nature of a company, or in the nature of a trust, or in the nature of Institute of Chartered Accountants of India. It's this one, trust. But I just feel that it should abide by this concept. So, non-government I should not say much. Yeah. So, non-government organization, ICAI is an example of trust. Okay, NGO in the nature of a trust. Do you know that this ICAI has formed a committee? Huh? This committee is called as Expert Advisory Committee. Which committee? This committee says, shh, listen. This committee says that whenever any NGO is formed, it should always follow fund accounting. Which accounting? Fund accounting. Sir, what do you mean by fund accounting? Fund accounting simply means whenever an NGO creates pool of money, which is called as fund, and in the language of NGO, I can also call this term as corpus. Don't fall. It is called as what? Corpus. Corpus means the funds which are contributed by the donor. The donor of the, many people donate money, so it is called as what? Corpus. So what is corpus? It is nothing but it is the contributions which are received from donors. Expert Advisory Committee says that every NGO must maintain 4 types of funds. Which are those types, I'll tell you. But tell me, what do you mean by fund? Fund means a... What is corpus? Corpus is a contribution made by the donor. The funds which are maintained by an NGO can be classified like this, 4 types. The first fund is called as restricted fund. Which fund? You should remember the names and you should write them. Start thinking. If you think in exam, you will waste your time. Okay, so fatafat you should tell me. Restricted. Next one, unrestricted. Unrestricted fund. Then it is development fund. Which fund? Development. Which is the first one? Then? And the last one is called as endowment fund. Which fund? Endowment fund. Okay. So now since there are 4 types of funds, there are 4 types of uses also for these funds. Please understand. There are how many type of funds? 4 type of funds. So 4 uses also. Number 1, restricted fund. Now, do you know that a restricted fund can be only used for a specific purpose? You should write in exam. Like there are certain NGOs which are formed just to cure cancer patients. So that money which is contributed in the restricted fund will be only used for curing cancer patients. There are some funds which are formed, NGOs which are formed for polio eradication scheme. Eradicate polio from India. Do boon zindagi. So now if any fund is constituted to eradicate polio, the objective should be to eradicate polio only. That is what is the nature of this fund. You know, for an auditor, what he should do, he should always read the agreement to see what is the intention of the donor. And he must make sure that as per donor's instruction only the money should be used. Sometimes donor give money, sometimes they give asset also. They may give a big equipment or a machine on the basis of which the cancer patients can be cured. So he should see whether this has been. And you know what is a journal entry which will be passed? I'll show you the accounting entry also. Whenever you receive any money, it will be always the cash which is received or the asset account will be debited. And restricted fund account will be credited. That means here restricted fund is treated as the liability. What is it treated? So restricted fund is a liability of the fund unless you are not. So whenever this entry, suppose if he gives me 100 rupees. So restricted fund is my liability. That means I can treat this as my asset by debiting restricted fund and again crediting the cash. Suppose if I incur only 80 rupees as expenditure, 20 will be still shown as liability. So income and expenditure both should tally. That is why it is non-profit, no profit. How I can make a profit in NGO? Income and expenditure both should tally. So I can recognize something as my income to the extent of the expenditure which is incurred. Have you understood or not? So I can recognize something as my income to the extent of expenditure which is incurred. That is why if I pass an entry for 80 rupees, that means this is only what is I am going to recognize as my income. Since I have no profit here, that is why we are working on not for profit making organization. You know, unrestricted fund is called as general fund. There is no specific use for this fund. No specific use means what, sir? It means that this fund can be used to meet all your administrative costs. There are people who are working inside the NGO, their salaries and wages. NGO has an office, so rent, electricity bills, utility bills, all that can be paid out of the unrestricted fund. Why unrestricted fund? Because the purpose is not specified by the donor. So whenever the donation is not specifying the purpose, the money should be always credited into which fund? Unrestricted, general fund. Okay. If it is specified, then it is credited to the restricted fund. What will be the journal entry in this case? Cash account debit to unrestricted fund account. Again, this will be my liability. Have you understood or not? Shall I give you this much other points tomorrow or whenever there is a lecture? Write fast. Audit of non-government organization. Audit of non-government organization. First point. Non-government organizations, NGOs, can be formed either as a company, comma, or a trust, or as a society, Full stop. Next point. As per the expert advisory committee, of ICAI, NGOs have to follow have to follow the fund accounting system. Have to follow the fund accounting system. Full stop. A fund means corpus contributions. Fund means corpus contributions made by donors. Corpus contributions made by donors. And since NGOs are not for profit, therefore they can recognize income to the extent of expenses incurred. They can recognize income to the extent of expenses incurred. Full stop. Next point. NGOs have to maintain 4 types of funds. That is restricted fund, unrestricted fund, unrestricted fund, development fund, and the last one is endowment fund. ENDOWMENT, endowment fund. Next point. In case of a restricted fund, money should be used for the purpose which is specified. Money should be used for the purpose which is specified by the donor. For example, cancer research. Or polio eradication. Cancer research or polio eradication. Full stop. An auditor should verify same point, auditor should verify the donor's agreement to see the intention of donation. Can you pass this journal entry? Cash or asset account debit to restricted fund account. You should show this entry to the examiner also. Cash or asset account debit to restricted fund account. And you circle that restricted fund, you write there it is treated as a liability. Till expenses incurred. For a fund, it is a liability till expense is incurred. And one more point. In case of unrestricted fund, the purpose is not specified by the donor. The purpose is not specified by the donor. Therefore, this fund can be used. Therefore, this fund can be used for general purpose. For general purpose. For example, to meet the administrative cost. To meet the administrative cost. Please pass the entry. Cash account debit to unrestricted fund account. Cash account debit to unrestricted fund account. Please tell me it is clear up to this stage. So thank you very much. Have a nice time.